like I said earlier, I kind of have just always been a meditative person. Like I didn't realize it, but when I was a kid, I was just constantly meditating. I was just in my head, daydreaming or meditating, however you want to think about it. It was very kind of just quiet a lot of times. I was still very social, but just kind of very in my head and kind of deep in thought. And that once I got older and was kind of partying too much and lost focus, that meditative end of me, I could feel kind of slipped away. And it wasn't there like it was when I was younger. So once I started to put this balance back in my life a couple years ago, I started meditating again, like actually sitting down and meditating. I also have an amazing partner. She's a yoga instructor and she meditates daily. So she pushes me to do the same. So I've just been kind of blessed with the right people in my life at the right time. Honestly, also this move up here has been really good for me. Keeping away from a lot of the temptation of the old partying days and all that. It's really allowed me to kind of focus on the important things for me to move forward, to be where I want to be. And thankfully, I've always told myself to just have the patience and it'll come. Keep plugging away, do the daily stuff. Don't worry about where other people are at and all that. Just keep grinding and eventually you'll get where you want to be.
You're listening to the Freio
Music Podcast.
To the Freio Music
Podcast.
So I'm Kevin McAllister, easy to remember if you know the movie Home Alone. I go by Stoik is my artist name, and I currently live in Seattle now. I just moved up here from San Diego.
Where were you born initially?
So I was born in Riverside, California, and then I grew up in San Diego, so kind of relatively same area, about an hour and a half north of San Diego is where I was born. But from age 5 until basically the beginning of this year, I lived in San Diego area. For the most part, a few years here and there, other spots, but San Diego most of my life.
And then what sparked the recent move?
My girlfriend, her job is based out of Bellevue up here near Seattle, and they finally gave her an offer that we couldn't turn down, so we came up here and been really enjoying the move and getting to a new area. And I love just all the trees up here, surrounded by water, lakes, rivers, mountains, everywhere. So I'm definitely enjoying it up here. Nice.
And this will be your first winter up there?
Yeah, we got here towards the end of winter. So I was here, I basically moved up in February. So yeah, for a couple months we got winter. Snowboarding is one of my favorite things to do. So we got to go ride a bunch at Stevens Pass at the beginning of when we first got up here, so that was nice. Cool.
If we rewind time back to your early days, what first got you into music? What was kind of the entry point for you?
So I found a guitar in my dad's closet when I was in, I think, 8th grade, and picked it up, just started playing, taught myself. Never had any lessons or anything, just kind of picked it up, started playing every day, and that was my kind of musical creative escape. I always tinkered around on piano and stuff when I was a kid. My parents had a piano in the house, but never had any lessons or anything. I've always been drawn towards being creative, been drawing and painting since I was a little kid as well. So finding that guitar, I just kind of dove in, was doing it every day, and eventually started playing in bands and just kind of fell in just by happenstance finding that guitar that my dad had gotten. Excuse me. Actually, when he was in the Navy, he got it in the Philippines. So he just randomly had a guitar in his closet that I picked up, started playing.
Nice. And when you were first starting, were you mimicking what you heard or learning other songs by tab?
No, I was honestly just would look up songs that I liked, listen to. Honestly, early on, I was listening to a lot of like Dave Matthews Band, John Mayer, that kind of stuff. So I would just learn their songs, and then eventually I started writing my own stuff. That definitely had a lot of like influence from both of those artists,
Nice.
and then just kind of grew from there.
When you started writing your own stuff, obviously that's a big break or a big change in direction from trying to imitate or learn somebody else's songs to creating something brand new. So, what was it in your mind that went off that you kind of wanted to explore the unknown?
I think that's just that creative bug in me. I always just want to be creating in some form or another. So I think it was just kind of a natural step for me to start playing around and just trying to find my own unique sound or just put out some kind of emotion that I was feeling through playing certain hooks or riffs. And I would just sit there and play them over and over and over. Kind of similar now to when I produce, where you can just sit there and listen to the same thing on repeat, trying to kind of either dial it in or just feeling that moment as much as you can. So yeah, I just kind of naturally stepped into trying to be more creative with it and not just mimicking other people's stuff, basically.
When did you start deciding to record or kind of capture your ideas?
That didn't come till like later. Obviously, once computers started getting a little bit more advanced, like GarageBand and stuff like that came out. So I think the first thing I really started recording on was like GarageBand. I think it was actually more basically into like college. Was with the first time I really started recording in any way on my roommate's computer with GarageBand.
Nice.
Doing a lot of covers and the stuff. Some of the stuff that I had written, because I also used to try and sing a little bit. I don't have the best voice or anything, but I definitely was writing stuff and singing and playing together. So that was my introduction to recording.
Were there any light bulbs that went off when you started recording?
Just getting in that flow state, honestly. That's what I was talking about, just being on repeat. I could just listen to something over and over because it kind of made me feel like I was still in that flow state. And that's ultimately what creativity comes down to, is getting in that flow state and just trying to ride that wave as long as you can.
To get in that flow state, if you're working with new technology, sometimes it's frustrating. You're trying to do something, you hear something in your head, but you can't translate it to the computer. How do you work with yourself and the technology to maintain that flow state, as you mentioned?
I think just not trying to force anything, just being kind of in the moment and letting it rip and not sitting there trying to force like I need it to sound this way. I also just used the tools that I had. I'd used sounds that came with the GarageBand or anything that I could find to help enhance the sounds I was making. Similar to now, I mean, as a producer, like just starting out, I would use a lot of sounds that like samples I could find or presets on VSTs. That's kind of just using whatever you have as a tool to try and kind of find your sound, and then eventually you start learning how to manipulate things to really make sounds that you're hearing or want to make, as opposed to just kind of using sounds that are there that you can use to try and make something that you would like.
When you began recording, were you recording kind of acoustic instruments, or were you going straight into the MIDI realm?
Mostly acoustic. So I the guitar I first found was acoustic guitar. So I taught myself guitar on acoustic. Eventually I got electric guitars, but it was mostly my love for that acoustic sound that really just pushed through on most things. Still a huge fan of like cellos, violins, a lot of string instruments, flutes. I love flutes. I think just have always kind of liked that acoustic style, which kind of still transfers over to some of the elements that I use nowadays as well. So
Cool. Well, let's transition to when you started Stoik and how that came to be initially.
Sure. So I was honestly kind of wrestling with some names. I think I started off as like RYG, which was red, yellow, green. Used to smoke a lot of cannabis back in the day. Realize your gifts is kind of what I translated as. I was back then. I like to use a lot of reggae influence, and then I transitioned and was looking for other names. Came up with a couple other things, didn't really stick. And then I met Walla, female producer Walla, and first time I met her, she looked at me and just was like, you're really stoic. And there was like a light bulb in my head that just went off. Like, that's it. That's what fits. I've always just kind of been very deep inside my head, kind of a very meditative person. I've even been at shows or festivals plenty of times where people come up and like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm great. My face might be like very stoic, but inside my head, I'm having a great time. So I've always just kind of been inside my head. So I felt like stoic was a good fit for me.
Was there something about the philosophy or the meaning behind the word? Obviously, you spell it slightly different.
Sure.
With a K at the end.
Yeah, so it's a phonetic spelling. So S-Y-K. I've always just kind of identified with that philosophy, kind of putting your emotions second and not letting them rule your actions. It's good to feel those emotions, but not allowing them to kind of rule what you do, and just being logical with your actions and staying centered.
So let's transition to talking about a few of your tracks. Reflection is one. And I'm curious if there's a backstory or a feeling or something that you were trying to evoke when creating that song.
It's at a very transitional point, I think, for this track. Really starting to find my sound. Still wasn't quite there yet. I think my new stuff is what I'm going to be releasing shortly is kind of, I've finally stepped into what I've wanted Stoik to be for a long time. But that reflection kind of, I feel like was a good transition spot, of reflecting on the past. I mean, I've been at this for, I think, close to 12 years now, doing electronically, for electronic music. And so I think that was just subconsciously just a reflecting moment of looking back and then seeing where I'm going to be headed.
Interesting. So you're, in a way, anticipating where you're going.
Right.
With the track. So tell me a little bit about where you're going and maybe some of the differences from your previous sound.
Sure. Yeah, I feel like I found my flow of, as far as the quality of track, like sounding, that I've wanted it to be. And then just, I don't know, I've always kind of felt like I've been waiting for this certain feel that I've been wanting to emanate from my tracks that I'm making. And as of like last year is when I really hit that moment of like, this is it. Like, I finally feel like I'm making the music that I've been wanting to make for over 10 years.
And how do you know when you found it, or how do you know that you have found it?
It's just this feeling. It's like the universe like is smacking you in the face and saying, here it is. I can't even, it's hard to put into words, but it's just the feeling that I get. Yeah, like I can sit there and listen to my tracks on repeat, and I just have this feeling of like, this is the emotion and the just what I'm trying to put out for other people to feel. And it's done in a way that everything is balanced properly.
Tell me about the balance. Like, what do you mean by that?
Just as far as like I was saying with levels, quality of the sounds, as well as making my sound so that doesn't matter what track. Or I like to make multiple genres. You can still tell that that's my song, that's my sound. So just falling into my sound.
When you think about creating multiple different genres and different sounds, but there's some sort of continuity there that is your signature.
Mm-hmm.
Are you creating sounds in Logic or Ableton that you're saving as presets that you reuse, or how do you think that there is the continuity there between the songs?
Honestly, I don't really do a lot of saving the sounds I use from other songs. It's interesting. I generally start pretty fresh on songs. Sometimes, like within an album, I'll use some similar sounds or whatever, but for the most part, I'm just using new tones or sounds to create my sound. I know that sounds kind of weird, but it all just kind of works together, even though it isn't the same exact sound that I'm using on repeat. That's another thing that I'm really happy with where I'm at now is it's not like I'm on repeat using the same exact samples or same presets that I've made or whatever. I'm coming up with new sounds and using new sounds on each thing, but it all still comes back as this kind of cohesive sounding thing that represents me.
When you are starting out from scratch, you have a blank slate. First of all, do you use Ableton?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I use Ableton.
And where do you typically start? Of course, every creation is unique,
Sure.
But where do you typically start?
For a long time, I mean, growing up being so guitar focused, I always used to start with like a melody and then kind of build from there. But then I learned that like I need to make, it's electronic music, it's dance music. I need to make the beat one of the big focuses because that's how you make people move. So eventually then I started with beats and then would kind of build melodies around those. Honestly, now it just varies. Sometimes I'll play a little something like the melody that I like and just kind of build it off of that. Other times I'll just start with a nice beat and then kind of build feelings off of that, and I won't even get to a melody until later on. So it just kind of depends on how I'm feeling. It kind of varies.
If you are starting with a beat, is it, I notice in some of your tracks that there's obviously a lot more percussion going on besides just the kick and snare.
Sure.
And when you're creating rhythms with electronic percussion elements, how do you think about enhancing the kick and snare and just adding some extra flavor or rhythm that is not there just with the two layers?
Sure. Yeah, generally I'm starting with like the kick and snare and just basic drums. And then one of my favorite things to do is go back and create space. So take things out to create that negative space in there. I think it adds so much to your groove, your rhythm, just the flow. Instead of it just being one sample that just keeps going or a drum beat that keeps going, adding in a lot of just little glitchy stops that allows me to throw in something else that transition into the next thing. I love just that use of air and a lot of glitchy sounds on top that'll kind of rhythmically bring you into the next phrase.
And when you're thinking about rhythm, I notice that your kicks are not just steady kicks. You've got this tempo maybe inside of you that is kind of has a little bit of a stutter or like a the word will come to me, I'm sure, in like 5 minutes.
No, I think I get what you're trying to say. Yeah, just it has more of that glitchy. A lot of it kind of has like an offbeat, glitchy feel to it. Honestly, I love hip hop. I love hip hop beats. I used to love trap music. I still like trap music, but that hip hop beat is always kind of in my head. And I love playing around with that. I'm not limiting myself to just being a basic hip hop beat, but I always come back to a lot of that feel within my rhythms that I make. I've also been playing around a lot with just like different tempos and different kind of rhythms, but still has an anchor similar to like a hip hop beat. So I've been really enjoying that lately, just kind of playing around with different rhythms and grooves, but still kind of hitting with a little bit of a hip hop feel to it.
And what is it about hip hop or that particular beat that speaks to you, or if you could articulate it, are you tapping it on a beat pad? Are you playing it on a drum set? Is it mouse and you're just mousing in the MIDI notes?
I'm honestly
Keyboard.
mostly just doing a lot of using my laptop to make it. So like MIDI style. I do some tapping as well, but for the most part, a lot of it's just kind of plug and play and then finding the right groove with it. But I'm actually right now I'm looking to get some new stuff to start playing around. I actually want to incorporate more live stuff, maybe even bring in some guitar type stuff, guitar elements from a lot of the stuff I've written before for guitar. But yeah, I don't really limit myself. I like to just kind of play around, be creative, and try and kind of find my groove in multiple ways.
So what are some of your favorite go-to VSTs or plugins inside the computer?
So I use Serum a lot still. Vital's good. Sublab, I use that a lot for my low-end stuff. And then just a lot of Ableton stock stuff. Operator I like playing around with. Yeah, I honestly right now too, I'm trying to push out a little bit more, get some new ones, get fresh, because I've kind of been using a lot of the same ones for a long time. So I'm trying to kind of make myself go back and just continue to always be a student. It's actually one of my favorite quotes is always strive to be a beginner. So I really try and take that to heart and just keep trying to learn new things and use new ways of doing things instead of just getting stuck in the same path that you've been doing for a long time.
When you are thinking about adding a little extra flavor, you've got the beat down, maybe you start to solidify the melody or kind of the flow of the song, but I'll call it ear candy. How do you consider bringing in sounds that are maybe one-off or very rarely put into the song that kind of add a little extra surprise and delight to the listener?
Sure. It's mostly just through feel. I have things in my head will pop up, like a certain sound or feel that I'm trying to invoke. And then I'll just kind of go through a lot of the sounds that I have. I do use Splice a lot, especially for a lot of one-shot samples that I can then kind of play with and make my own. So it's kind of just feeling it out and trying to get in that flow state. And generally in that flow, I'm not really like thinking about what should come next. It's the best music I make is when I'm just kind of the conduit and it's flowing through me. It's not me thinking about what might sound good. It just comes out, and just being open to be that conduit and get that flow out in the right way.
And how do you keep that conduit channel open and make sure that you're not getting overhung up on adjusting levels or EQing or doing kind of the minor things that might interrupt the flow state?
It can be hard. Honestly, just trying not to force anything, trying not to go back too much and play with tiny little sounds specifically. I like to have sessions where if I'm flowing, just flow, keep throwing things in, keep adding things, keep letting the track build. It's kind of easy to get hung up on just like a little like 16 bar loop or 32 bar loop, but just flowing and let that like keep extending it out. And then I can come back later to just kind of add in a lot of those little detail things or add in the air like I was talking about before and taking things out. But yeah, if I'm in a good flow, I'm just trying to get as much out as possible, and then I can come back and edit it after.
How do you avoid overlayering? And you kind of mentioned you got to take things out eventually, but in that flow state, you're adding, and then afterwards you start subtracting. But how do you think about the composition in the end and make sure that it's not too busy or too silent?
Sure. I mean, that's one of the things I struggled with. I think that's another thing I was talking about with finding my sound, was finding the right balance of that. I like to add a lot of layers. Some of my tracks, I have 150, 160 channels on it. I mean, it's
Wow.
a lot. So yeah, it can be tough. And that's one of the things that I was talking about, just finding my sound, finding that right balance of all those layers and learning how to layer those things properly. With my earlier stuff, it just, too much stuff crammed in there and nothing's coming through clean. So it's tricky. to layer a lot of things on top and have it come through clean is tough. It's not easy. So I think it's just kind of been years of working hard at it has helped me like figure out the right balance of those things. And I mean, I'm still learning, still growing, hopefully keep getting better. But yeah, just I think my ear has naturally started to understand how to balance those things right and not have too many things going on at once.
And when are you most creative? Do you work through the night? Do you get up early in the morning?
I used to be a night owl for good solid 10 years. The first 10 years I did this, my average bedtime was 4 a.m. I liked working late. I felt like the energy's quiet because everyone's asleep. And it just allowed me to kind of get in a good spot. Nowadays, I'll take it whenever I can find it. I'm working a lot right now, so it's a little bit of a struggle balancing that and finding the right time to do everything. But I'm also stacked up on a lot of music right now that's unreleased. I have probably close to 25 songs that are basically pretty much ready to go. If not ready to go, they're close. So I'm also just a lot of times just kind of tweaking on those and playing around with them and trying to get them finished up. I also struggle with being a perfectionist, unfortunately. So it's hard for me to let go sometimes and just get it out there. It's supposed to be they call it a record for a reason. It's a record of that time. And so actually this album I'm going to be releasing soon on High Vibe I've been struggling with trying to maybe add more to tracks because they're not as long as I would want them to be, but I've just realized it's just get them out there. Like even if they're shorter than what you think they should be, it's like I said, it's a record of that time that you made it. So just get it out. So that's what I'm finally realizing I just need to release that stuff and keep moving forward because I have a lot of tracks I'm sitting on right now, so I need to push those out.
And when do you know a song is done?
Well, back to that perfectionist thing, it's tough. Honestly, most of the songs I make that I really love, it's like 1 or 2 days and I knock it out, like most of the track. You know, I can keep adding things or doing little tweaks to it, but for the most part, all my best music that I've made is like in a day or two and just flows out quickly. Stuff I have to come back and play around with a lot usually to me doesn't flow quite as well. So there's something about, in my opinion, just hitting that flow state in that moment and just taking it in, getting it out, and then coming back to do the editing and stuff afterwards. But yeah, it can be hard. I mean, that's why I'm sitting on a lot of music and haven't released it, because it's hard for me to just kind of let it go. I think it's also just, it's hard to put yourself out there too, worrying about how other people are going to be perceiving it and all that. But that's where I just got to be confident. And like I said, I feel like I've found my sound and just get it out, let other people hear it.
You mentioned the perfectionism element or aspect to creating art, and I think most people struggle with this to some extent. But what strategies have you developed? And I know you've got that beginner mind and you're still evolving and developing, but what strategies have you come up with to help combat the perfectionism? And you've already released music, so you've overcome it, at least, you know, with those tracks. So right. What strategies have you evolved?
Well, a lot of the ones I released too are, like I just put out that remix song for Ruby Chase, or the collab album with Equanimous. So those are a little easier because I kind of have, it's almost like I have a deadline where I have to get it out because someone else is relying on me. But as far as myself, it's more of just recent, kind of just been really meditating and sitting on it and talking to other friends that are big producers and big artists already. They're already touring, that have just told me, like, man, just get it out. Like, nothing's perfect. Just get it out for people to hear and keep moving forward, keep making more songs. Because that's the other thing too. It's easy as a perfectionist to get hung up, and then you're just overworking something instead of just getting it out and working on the next thing and the next thing. And the more tracks you make, the better they're going to get. So that's just kind of, I think I've finally realized, just just keep moving forward. Stop trying to make everything perfect, because nothing is.
That's well said. So you mentioned collaborations. How do you approach working with somebody else? I know you made a full EP with Equanimous and you're working with various other people. How do you approach those collaborations, and how do you think about incorporating others' ideas and feedback into like a cohesive or a collaboration?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it can be tough, to be honest. I mean, or it can be great and amazing. I've had collabs with people that are just kind of never really flows well. It's almost like we're kind of butting heads, and one person wants this, the other person wants to take that out. Those can be a little tricky, or those also a lot of times just fizzle into nothing, and nothing happens. Generally speaking, I like to kind of we'll figure out something we're vibing together on initially, and then we kind of just shoot it back and forth and do our own thing. I'm at my best when I'm producing by myself. If I'm with other people, I can come up with good ideas and we can flow well. But as far as like getting down to like making a well-produced track, I like to just take my time and be by myself. That's when I flow best. But it's just, you just got to find the people that you vibe really well with. There's definitely some artists I'm hoping to connect with in the future that I feel like our styles would vibe well together. That's the other thing, is finding people where you think your sounds will kind of help each other out, or that will be really cohesive and just create a really cool sound.
You definitely described that some just fizzle out into nothing, some definitely are easier to work with. Do you ever work in person with people, or do you obviously you mentioned you prefer working solo, but are you ever in the same room when you're collaborating?
Yeah, for sure. A lot of times I like to start, like we'll be jamming together on something to begin with in the same room. Like I know with Nate and I, Equanimous, I recorded all of his samples basically that he made for all the different tracks. And we worked with Heather Activation as well, Hana. So those basically, especially with like Activation and Nate, I was there physically. So it just depends who you're working with, but with like musician focused people like Nate, it's more we're vibing, he's recording out a bunch of stuff, and then I'll go and use it to make all the beats and the sounds and put them all together and make the cohesive thing. So I really enjoy that process too. It's almost like being a sound engineer for a little bit at the beginning, and then you get to just use all those sounds.
Tell me about a failure or a perceived failure that helped set you up for success.
Honestly, more just sometimes I'll get frustrated with, or in the past, I've gotten frustrated with seeing people that I used to be at the same level at, and they were pushing ahead and were thriving, and they're touring around the country or the world, and just feeling like I should be there already, and seeing myself as kind of a failure. There's been a couple times, honestly, where I was ready to hang up my hat. Actually, that's Totality. That's how I got signed with High Vibe Records. Was one of my friends who ran sound, Riley. He got me booked at Totality, and I was literally about to hang up my hat. I thought I was done with music. I didn't like my music anymore. I thought it was just quality-wise wasn't anything near what it should be compared to other people. And I played that festival, and I got a great spot. I think I played at like 10 o'clock on Saturday, and I played all original music, and everyone loved it. Like, vibed with it. Had a ton of people coming up afterwards asking about it. So that just kind of boosted my confidence again. And that's also, Nate heard about it, and that's how I got signed with them for releasing music. And from there is just put a lot of discipline back in my life and put a lot of balance back in my life. And the second I did that, all this new stuff came out. That was when I really found my sound and just kind of took off with it. So yeah, just use that as a launching point to kind of find myself again and just make it fun again too. Because that's the other thing is I feel like for a little bit I wanted it to be my 100%. This is how I make all my money. This is how I do my life. And it kind of started to turn it into feeling like work. And I started to lose the passion and just felt like I was kind of going through the motions. And I could make some stuff that kind of sounded cool, but there was no heart behind it. So I think once I found myself again and had put that balance back in my life, I really was able to just start making the music that I've been wanting to make finally.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you sharing that. It's so easy to compare yourself against somebody else and wonder why those roles aren't reversed or why it's taking so long to get to where you want to get. And you mentioned something about balance and discipline. You put those back in your life. And earlier you mentioned meditation. Mm-hmm. I feel like there might be some something that ties all those together regarding mental clarity and mindset. You mentioned meditation. Is that a consistent practice? And if so, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about how that looks in your life. Sure,
absolutely. Yeah, to be honest, I mean, I got a little deep into partying too much, and that became the focus. And like I said earlier, I kind of have just always been a meditative person. Like, I didn't realize it, but when I was a kid, I was just constantly meditating. I was just in my head, daydreaming or meditating, however you want to think about it. It was very kind of just quiet a lot of times. I was still very social, but just kind of very in my head and kind of deep in thought. And that, once I got older and was kind of partying too much and lost focus, that meditative end of me, I could feel kind of slipped away. And it wasn't there like it was when I was younger. So once I started to put this balance back in my life a couple years ago, I started meditating again, like actually sitting down and meditating. I also have an amazing partner. She's a yoga instructor and she meditates daily. So she pushes me to do the same. So I've just been kind of blessed with the right people in my life at the right time. Honestly, also this move up here has been really good for me. Keeping away from a lot of the temptation of the old partying days and all that. It's really allowed me to kind of focus on the important things for me to move forward, to be where I want to be. And thankfully, I've always told myself to just have the patience and it'll come. Keep plugging away, do the daily stuff. Don't worry about where other people are at and all that. Just keep grinding and eventually you'll get where you want to be. So I think I'm starting to finally see that light at the end of the tunnel.
When you meditate, do you have a mantra? Do you say something out loud? Is it totally silent? How does that practice look?
It depends. Honestly, I think you can meditate in many ways. You can be walking outside, just walking through nature, meditating. You can be sitting with your eyes closed inside in a dark room. You can be listening to music. You can be listening to someone talk. I honestly just take every advantage I can. If I'm driving, a lot of times I'm sitting there zoning out, meditating. Obviously, I'm still paying attention driving, but it's just getting
that
in
sounds
that.
Like a tricky one.
Yeah, but just like those moments where you have clarity or self-realizations, or you're just kind of working through things in your brain. Or breathing techniques are great. I do a lot of box breathing. That kind of hits the vagus nerve and just allows your brain to kind of calm down a little bit, help you stay focused. So just using lots of different ways, or even making music. I mean, flow state is essentially meditation or art. I'm also a painter. I used to do a lot of painting. I'm trying to get back into it a little bit more. I used to paint at events and stuff. That's another form of meditation. Anything flow state, anything where you're doing your art and you're in that flow state, that's meditation. So I try and get to meditative states in any way I can, basically. So there's a few other songs that I want to talk about just a little bit, and I know that your sound is evolving, but some of those are not released yet, so sure, we don't have the opportunity to talk about those as much. But there's a song that's kind of one of your older tracks, Techie Nickley. Yeah,
And technically,
sure.
there's some pretty cool kick rhythms, and I wonder, how do you land on like a particular flow? You mentioned hip hop earlier, but it seems like there's something intricate about the kick in particular.
Yeah, that I love that song. Honestly, definitely in my probably top 10 of my favorite songs that I've made. I feel like it's got this slow build and just this open feel of a lot of the focus, which the kick goes hand in hand with that. And it kind of, yeah, the kick just kind of drives it with that low end together. Like without that balance in that song, I don't think it really works too well. But yeah, that's one of my old go-to tracks. I love playing sunrise sets and stuff like that, and that's, I think, a really good one for that too. But yeah, I mean, I definitely, like you said, the kick just has a very important feel to that song.
Yeah, certainly. And there's a great breakdown, roughly in the halfway mark, and the highs come through and the bass gets cut out, and then there's a sound, and I don't really know how to describe it properly, but it almost sounds like a crash in reverse, like shh, and it's got this really hard cutoff, and then obviously the song breaks into like a really crunchy bass and a very different feel, and the bass line the sound of the bass is totally different than the first half. And I'm curious about how you think through creating those transitions and the space in between different parts of the song.
Sure. I mean, that goes back, like I was saying before, the taking things out and creating that space through using those high-end little rhythmic elements. I use a lot of reverse. I use reverse kicks, reverse snares, claps. It has this kind of like sucking pull feel to it. And if you use that right with the air and then hitting again, it just creates this cool groove, or kind of throws you back and forth into the one count. So yeah, I mean, that's one of my favorite things to do. Like I said, it's just creating those spatial elements that really add to the rhythmic value of the track.
Well, there's something about like reverse sounds that are foreign to the ear because you don't hear them naturally. You hear sound, it has a tail. It usually is loudest at the beginning, like when you hit a guitar string.
Right.
It's loudest, then it gets quieter. But when you reverse that, it's obviously the opposite. And I feel that there's something unique about reverse sounds that are kind of delightful, also thought-provoking as well. So I appreciate you sharing that you're using reverse in many different elements. So my ear might have been right about a reverse crash on that one. So
that's like a risers too. That's a lot of times I'll take like an impact and just reverse it, and that creates the riser. So yeah, I have a lot of samples of impacts and risers that I can use either way.
And when you're using a sound, let's just say a reverse sound, do you think about the start as like needs to be very importantly placed, or the end of the sound?
I think both are important. They both have their spot within the space of the track. But I think with that reverse, it's the right where you're ending it has the most value to what that sound is creating, I think, because it's that pull into boom, air, and then whatever else is coming after it. Or a lot of times I also do a lot of reverse like snares or claps into a snare. So it creates like a pull into the rhythmic snare. Because with hip hop, your snare is your anchor. That's why a kick can be all over the place. But that snare is what you're constantly going to be coming back to. So having that pull into it just creates this kind of sucking or pull feel into that snare, onto that anchor.
And then there's an element in that kind of drop section or the middle section that gives space, I feel like it's a tape deck slowing down. I don't know how better to describe it, but maybe you've got other words. It's a kind of a unique feel to that sound or to that section of the song.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like drone kind of elements within that one. I'm pretty sure I used some sitar. I love sitar. Actually, the guitar that I play, when a lot of times I'm playing it open tuning, and it kind of sounds like sitar. I kind of feel back and forth between blues and sitar. So I love using drones, and in that track, that's that one of the main elements at the beginning, and then in the middle on the breakdown is that droney sitar feel. And then I'm pretty sure I put some other just effects and Foley stuff on top that helps kind of amplify that feel of that drone into finally hitting back on that second drop with the heavier bass.
I think there's something in there that like brings everything down and bam, and then things hit. It really creates that space it's a unique element in that particular song that I don't hear in other tracks of yours, and it certainly stands out. So it's one of my favorite tracks, that's for sure, of yours. So
thank you, man.
Yeah, it's a cool one. So a few other questions I have for you. You mentioned one quote earlier, and I don't want to try and re-say it and butcher it, but were there any particular books, quotes, or messages that have most impacted your life?
I've always been a fan of Be Here Now. It's a great book. It's an easy one to just flip through.
And that's the one where the text is all written like wildly, right? Like
right.
There is no such thing as a straight line.
No.
Yeah.
And there's
pictures
so cool. Throughout, art throughout. It's a great book. There's other Stoik books that I like, that I go to. The Daily Stoic is a good one. That just has a lot of good. You don't have to sit there and read the whole thing. You can get a lot just by sitting and reading for a short time. The War of Art is another great one, especially for creative people. That just kind of helps. A lot of things that I've already talked about helps you work through a lot of those struggles as an artist. And actually, the quote I said earlier, I don't know if it's his originally, but it's actually Justin Timberlake is who I heard it through. Is I always strive to be a beginner. And that one's always just kind of stuck for being a mantra for me. So I think the second you think you know everything and you don't want to learn anymore and you think you know how to do it all, you're not going to keep growing from there. You're plateaued. There's no more growth. So just always striving to be a beginner. Also, I think keeps you humble. I've seen plenty of instances of artists losing their humility and their ego takes over, and then all of a sudden their music just doesn't do it for me anymore. There's nothing there. There's no heart. You don't feel that. So I think it's important to just always try to stay humble and be respectful of people, that all your interactions, and just not allowing your ego to take over. And that also goes back to the Stoicism philosophy as well.
Well, it's beautifully said. And have you read, by chance, just because you brought up Stephen Pressfield, have you read Turning Pro? Okay, that's another one of his. I just recently read it, and it really smacked me in the face. I actually read it twice, like back to back, and it's a really cool one. And one of my favorite analogies that he talks about is that there's very little difference between an addict and an artist. And he kind of describes the nuances of the difference, but it's a really... I feel like his style of writing is just very approachable, and I certainly agree that The War of Art is a beautiful book too. And the fact that he put to words something that I feel like all creatives feel, which is resistance.
Right.
And how, in the back of your head, you're saying, maybe I won't put that out, or I won't work on this art today, I'll do it tomorrow. And it's just procrastinating and causing mischief.
Absolutely.
In the mind. So, yeah, I feel like there's something important to be said to articulate those struggles that are internal, and that's, where we all are spending all of our day. So it's very important.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll definitely have to check that book out. Thankfully, I do a lot of audiobooks, so I'm going to check that one out too.
Yeah, me too. It's a good one. and he reads it. So it's that's
Nice. Yeah,
yeah,
that's good.
definitely recommend it. So outside of music,
Mhm.
what are you into? You mentioned painting, you mentioned meditation. What lights you up? What gets you excited?
Do a lot of bike riding up here. Just getting out in nature. Thankfully, there's a lot of it up here. Honestly, though, to be honest, I'm kind of a hermit. I like to be home working on music. I like to be home working on art. I've been lacking on the art end a lot lately, but I kind of need to get pulled out of my cave sometimes by my partner. She'll kind of make sure I'm getting out enough. But yeah, I've just always kind of like I'm fine by myself. I'm fine alone because I'm not a person that can ever really get bored. Like I don't understand when people say they're bored because you can always create something. There's always something to do. For me, it's more just having the time is the hard thing because I've been working so much. But thankfully, I'm going to be finding that balance a little bit better by next year. Probably start working for myself again. But yeah, just just whatever creative endeavors I can do. I love just hanging out with friends, playing games, going to shows, that kind of stuff. But for the most part, I'd rather just be at home working on music or hanging out with my dog and my girlfriend. So
Well, there's always so much to be done, especially somebody as multi-talented and artistic as yourself, doing crafts, painting, music, and of course everything that goes behind all that. Like there's just so many minor elements of organizing in your computer, releasing the art, working on the promotion, branding, things like that. So there's always stuff to do. And I feel you when you say you just wonder how people are bored. And
yeah,
I feel that.
yeah.
What would you say? Oh, keep going.
I will just say, yeah. I also I do graphic design as well, so that's another thing. I'm always on my laptop. Like I do all the art for my releases. My album art is all done by myself. So that's another outlet I have as well. And I can thankfully that's something. I mean, I can make music or work on graphic design anywhere. All I need is a laptop.
What would you say is your X factor? What separates you from the crowd? What gives you your unique elements?
I don't know how to I would necessarily put it into words. I've just been very aware person, I guess. So I've been just like soaking things in for a long time. I've been in playing shows, throwing shows, making music, being a DJ. I've been in part of or in any aspect of the scene like for a long time now. So I'm just kind of aware of all aspects of throwing shows, being a part of shows, all that kind of stuff. I think also just I've just been a very deep, meditative, creative person my whole life. So I think that comes out. I almost was like training myself since I was a kid. Even with the art, music, like I said, I've never had any lessons or anything. It's all just self-taught through feel. And I think that gives me just a good way of looking at things. I have friends that went to art school or music school, that kind of stuff. And I feel like sometimes they're kind of stuck in a very rigid looking at something instead of being just kind of open to do things in a non-conformative way or not a normal way, I guess. I mean, everyone has their art. Everyone has their thing they're good at. That's why I always think it's important for people to find their art, find what you're good at. It could be taking out the trash. It could be being a chef. Whatever you're doing through your actions that inspires other people to find their art, that's art. So I think I'm just trying to be me. Just try and do me and stay creative.
What advice would you give to a young musician starting out today?
Do you. Find your sound, find you. Don't try and copycat. I've done that plenty in the past too, where, I want to play at a more headline slot at a club or a festival. So I want to play or make more stuff that's like, dancier or heavier or anything like that. And it never really sounds as good as the stuff that just kind of flows out who I am. Like find what your sound is and who you are and just write it out. Also, don't be afraid to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. Watch tutorials, learn as much as you can, soak it in. Learn how multiple people do it. Try and find some artists maybe that are a little bit above you. Ask questions. Just always try and keep learning. I mean, you're never going to know it all. There's multiple ways to get to the same point. You could learn. I've worked with people that just started doing stuff, and I've learned from them. Like, you can always learn from people. So just be open to that and grind. I mean, when I first started making music, I was making it 14 hours a day. I wasn't sleeping. That was all I thought about. If I was at work, I was thinking about the track I was working on. Find that passion. You need that passion behind it. It's important. And just keep grinding. You'll get there. Don't let the feeling like you need to be somewhere, like you should be further ahead. I've gone through those thoughts plenty. But like I said, just have the patience, and eventually you'll get where you're supposed to be. Just keep grinding.
What are the best links, if for somebody who might not already know your music, what are the best links and platforms to reach out to you and follow you, keep up to date with your tour and art?
Spotify for sure. That has I think that's got pretty much all my music on it. SoundCloud still has a lot of my stuff on there as well. Those are probably the two. But I mean, you can find all my releases are going to be on pretty much all the major platforms, so you can find it there. But yeah, Spotify and SoundCloud would be the two if you're trying to like follow me and really see what all the current stuff is that I'm working on. You're not going to find a lot right now. Like I said, I'm sitting on a lot of unreleased music that's going to be coming out soon. So yeah, just keep your eyes open for that.
Last question is for you, open-ended. Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
I think I mean, I covered a lot of that. I'm just happy to be here and happy to share my experience.
Cool.
Just ready to push forward. And like I said, I have a ton of new stuff coming out. I'm trying to start getting booked more by next year or so once I get this music out. So that's just where I'm at right now as an artist.
Oh, that's great. Well, Kevin, I really appreciate your time here today. The fact that you have put out music, and I'm certainly looking forward to the stuff that's on the horizon. So I appreciate you being open and bringing myself and the listeners into the internal world, the meditative mind, and helping us understand who you are as a person, but also how to work with some of those inner fears and doubts and overcome that. So appreciate your time and art.
Likewise. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it.
Listening to the Freio Music Podcast with Michael Morahan. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single episode. And don't forget to share this podcast everywhere. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay tuned.
Freio Music, Freio Music, Freio Music, Freio Music. You are listening to Freio Music.